Back at it here on Kaufman Corner to talk some Royals baseball as the season gets ever closer. This be the penultimate episode of the Kaufman Corner before we get to the regular season and have real baseball to talk about. So why not discuss what the reasonable expectations are for this ball club? Not just this year, but the next couple of years, 2, 3 years, next 5 years. What are we talking about here? We're talking about payroll. We're talking about where their minor leagues should be ranked. We're talking about cold, hard wins. We're talking about postseason. When should those expectations be there? We're going to get into that here tonight. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember we stream live Sunday nights, usually Sunday, sometimes it's Monday, but at about 10 o'clock Central, we get going. Also, we want to talk about Carlos Hernandez, seemingly finding a home in the bullpen. Jackson Kowar looking for his apartment back in Omaha to work on his slider. 2-year deal for Jacob Brentz coming off the surgery, so they'll pay him to rehab, maybe get a little something this year, but then have him for next year. What's the logic behind this? And the much valued player to be named later. We know it for Adalberto Mondesi. Let's get to the bottom of all of it right now. We do it here on Kaufman Corner. Well, we'll do it without the open.
Sorry, Curtis.
Sorry, Curtis. My bad. I'm trying to figure out. Let's try it. See if the old one. No. Okay. I'll have to figure that out later. I have to figure out where we're going on that one. So, but I digress. Kaufman Corner is always brought to you by, we won't have Curtis's fancy open, but I'll tell you it is brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Of course, Kansas City's best, proudly serving the entire Kansas City metro area, including Overland Park, Olathe, Independence, Lee Summit, Shawnee, Blue Springs, Lenexa, Leavenworth, Leeward, Liberty, just to name a few of the locations. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Also, let you know, Gann Asphalt and Concrete is hiring all positions, project manager to dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour based upon experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Just check them out online. It's GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Rany, how about it? There are a lot of different ways to measure a team. There are a lot of different expectations to have. Mm-hmm. We thought here as we get going, we would, before the season actually launches, we would talk about what our expectations are. And then we would argue with each other, in all likelihood, let's be honest, about who got it right, whose expectations are ridiculous, and who's being way too lenient. How do you want to begin? Which element of the Royals do you want to begin with?
Well, I think we should start with the obvious, which is wins and losses. And I think the first, even before we talk about the actual number of wins and losses that we're expecting, the mere fact that we can start evaluating the team based on wins and losses is itself an expectation. So maybe the first expectation we should set is that the Royals don't use some other metric other than wins and losses to try and define success going forward. Like, we are through the early stages of the rebuild. This is the results section of the rebuild. And that doesn't necessarily mean the results have to be a playoff berth in 2023, but the results on the field should matter. And if they don't matter, or if the team claims they don't matter, that itself is not living up to expectations.
Okay. I would agree. I mean, I think we are at a point where we talk about this team, in terms of wins and losses. I mean, but I don't know that this is the year to put the wins and losses. If you were to put, we know what we've talked about, 68.5, 69.5 is the win total for this team right now. If you were to bet it, I got it at 68.5, bet it on FanDuel. I took the over, but that doesn't mean that my expectations are set at 68.5. If I were to put a win total on this year that I expect, I would say 75 is the win total I would expect. I don't think you can just creep. And listen, I think they're capable of, and I would be very happy to say 81. Let's say this team should be 500, right? I'm fine with that mindset because I think it's been long enough. But we've got a new regime. We've got a new manager. They are tweaking things. So I don't know that you could just say, if Dave Moore were here, I would say that this has got to have a winning record and potentially a playoffs, or we'd be talking about making a change. That change has now been made, but everything that comes with the change has not necessarily been instrumented. So that's why I will have a little bit more patience. I do think they're making some moves that look like they're setting up to make some deals to try to, I don't think this is a team that was put together necessarily to just win baseball games. I think it was a team that was put together to have assets to move. And so I will give them that opportunity to work on that part of the equation, to work on getting those assets moved, to try to bring more talent into the organization. And I'll be honest with you, if I watch what they do, and one of the reasons why I'll keep it at 75, why I think that's a reasonable expectation, and I don't immediately jump at 500, which again, if your expectation is 500, you, Rany, or any of our listeners out there, I'm not upset with it. And I get it where it comes from, and I don't think it's unreasonable. My feeling just is the reason why I'll set it, at least at this point, kind of low, is that we may see them move Aroldis Chapman, take your pick. Brad Keller gets off to a good start. Any number of guys. Hell, they may even move Brady Singer because they look at it and go, yeah, we are sideways with the guy. So we're going to move a guy with a lot of service time because we're going to get great prospects back. But if they're all lower prospects, then I'm looking at a team that is, clearly playing for the future. And so I don't want to be hanging 81 out there when I go, wow, they just moved Brady Singer, but they got the first, 9th, and 85th best prospects in baseball. This team will be a better team if they do that, but it won't result in an immediate bottom line. So maybe that's being weak. Maybe that's just, not willing to run right out there and jump in with both feet. But I see scenarios, I see pathways where they can be going in the right direction, make me really excited about where this team is going, but actually back up the bus from a wins and losses this year. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I'm going to stick with the number I've been throwing at you for weeks, 97.5. That was my over-under. No, I'm kidding. I actually was going to say 75 wins, but I'm going to kind of reframe it. We actually landed on the same number. We didn't discuss this beforehand.
You're mad. You're mad you let me go first now.
Yeah, now I have to reframe it. What I would say is, from a wins and losses standpoint, the Royals should either be at 500, or you could make a very easy case that they would have been at 500 had they actually been playing for this season all the way to the finish line. Right. So like you said, right, if at the trading deadline, they move Scott Barlow, maybe Brady Singer might be a little excessive, but that I'm willing to be creative, and I'm hoping this new administration is as well. But like a guy like Barlow could definitely be moved. Aroldis Chapman, you mentioned Amir Garrett. Like, there's going to be, there's always a seller's market for relievers at the deadline. I mean, the Mets are already down Edwin Diaz for the whole season, and immediately people thought that the Royals would be one of the first teams they might be looking for a closer. Someone like Barlow, if they decide to move Barlow now or in April because the Mets have an intense need, by all means, you give them a pass. So if they end up, to me, 75 wins seems to be the bare minimum where you could say, well, they would have been at 500 had they actually been trying to win all year. But I think within sight of 500 is reasonable to me this year. I think that's, and of course, some of that is going to depend on which players are helping them get close to 500. If they're getting good performances from the young hitters, and a couple pitchers move, take a step forward, then that I'm going to look at that more favorably than if there's win 75 games because Franmil Reyes is an MVP candidate, but like all their young prospects fall flat on their face.
Yeah. Can you agree? Would you agree that if this team won 82 games and Aroldis Chapman finishes out the year on the team, and every, Hunter Dozier hits 17 homers with a 321 on base, and an OPS is 745, and like there's a way that this team could win more games, maybe even stay in the race, but at the end of the year you'd feel worse, right? Because if the guys that do it, if you're just propped up, with Reyes and Chapman, and then they're walking, what have you really done, right? That's why I say they may come out, play 500-ish ball, move Reyes, move Chapman, move Keller, and it hurts the team, right? Because I don't know, like, unless Vinny's tearing the cover off the ball, and MJ Melendez's back comes around. And listen, I could, but I can say, I think it's going to be dangerous ground. The scariest part for me is if this team is hanging around at like 5.5 out. Right now, probably there'll be like 6 teams between them and the actual wild card spot if they're in that. But that's the most dangerous thing because, listen, I'll go back to what the Brewers did last year. Remember when the Brewers moved Hader when they were in contention and everybody freaked out? And I at that time, I said, listen, I get what they're doing, right? They're saying we are always going to make the right move for the long haul. And if we do that every time, eventually we'll back up enough talent that it won't matter, right? We won't have to, but anytime we get a chance to make a move that makes us better, we're going to make that move. And people don't want to hear that. They want to hear math. And that math is going to make you better, a little bit better every year. And then when you get close, then you're going to suddenly go for it. You're going to blast out all the money. We can talk about money. It's going to be one of the things we discuss. You can throw out all this money, and at that point, you throw away the math, and you're all in and you go for it. That sounds great. And everybody said that everyone was thrilled in 2015 and trying and wanted them to make moves in 16 and 17. And 18 came, and that was all right. But 19, they were pissed. Everybody was pissed. And, you know, that's why I see a dangerous scenario where these guys make them think they're in contention and they don't move people. Like I'll almost say that my expectation of what will be success this year is a lot of trades to get more young people and to make the farm system better. I almost think, and I hate to say it because nobody wants to hear it right now, that where the farm system ranks, and I know you've got thoughts on where that needs to be, but where the farm system ranks is a more important and better judge of progress for this team than whatever they might win at the big league level.
See, this is the transitional year. This is the year where the balance between winning now and winning in the future is really as close to 50-50 as it's going to be. Because what you're saying, yes, if they're 5.5 out, they should resist the temptation to go all in for this year, or even the temptation to not sell. But what if they find themselves in a situation where on July 31st, they're winning the wild card, or I guess the second wild, like they're in the playoffs on July 31st. That's a much harder sell to go to a fan base that hasn't sniffed, a meaningful game in now 7, almost 8 years, and say, we could go to the playoffs, but we don't think we can hold on for 2 more months. We're going to start selling some of these assets. And this is not a hypothetical scenario, because, I mean, that's essentially where the Royals were in 2016 and in 2017. It's easy to look at their final standings both years. They didn't even finish above 500, but both years they were not just in the wild card race, they were leading the wild card at some point in late July or early August, and then they fell off. And you mentioned the Josh Hader trade. I think the Josh Hader trade was very bold and potentially brilliant on the part of the Brewers, because they got so much talent for him. But the flip side of that is the Wade Davis trade, when the Royals traded Wade Davis for Jorge Soler, which from a math standpoint, as you say, from just a pure value now versus value later, was a defensible move. But from where the Royals were at that point, was absolutely the wrong move. The scenario for the 2023 Royals is the exact opposite of the 2017. The 2017 Royals, that was the last gasp of a competitive team. This is hopefully the first breath of a long period of contention. So this is the year where maybe you do trade a Wade Davis type. I can't imagine they have a Wade Davis on this team, but a Scott Barlow. If a Aroldis Chapman comes out guns a-blazing in April or May, yeah, this is the year you trade that guy, because getting a Jorge Soler, getting somebody who's going to be really good in 2 or 3 years, that's going to be a lot more valuable today than it was 6 years ago, when you knew you were going into, 100 loss kind of era for the Royals. So yes, if they finish 82 and 80 because all these guys are still around 100, Dozier has a bit of a bounce back year, but the young players don't take a step forward, that's a disappointment. But if they have meaningful baseball games being played in late September, even if they don't end up making the playoffs, it'll be hard to look back at that as a complete failure. I mean, that's, it's been long enough now for Royals fans that's not beanbag to say that they're actually going to play meaningful games in September. But this is going to be, it's almost a year where you almost hope they come out of the gate really good or really bad, to make those decisions clear early on, because without Dayton Moore there now, if they are bad to start the year, I think we're going to see all those guys who are one year or most 2 years away from free agency being moved for talent to really move that farm system forward.
You know what? I think in 16 game blocks, right? 10% of the season at a time. 7-9, 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. Right? Not playing bad baseball.
Right.
Because if you're god awful, nobody's worth trading. Right? Like, yes, Zach Greinke was able to put together a Cy Young year on a team that wasn't very good. But for the most part, you've got to have some success for anybody to be worth trading. So if you're going like 7-9, that's like, oh, well, we're still kind of in it. And then we're 14 and 18. I mean, we're still kind of in it. And then it's like, okay, 21 and now 27. Are you starting to see the writing on the wall? There's no streak coming, and you know that your path is there, yet you're still playing well enough. I think that would be the ideal situation. But I do. But I will say this: after this year, is it a winning record, or do we need to see what this year looks like to then decide whether or not this year was rock bottom? And guys like MJ Melendez, who will now be, 2 years into his service time, and Brady Singer will be going into his arbitration. Will it be clear that those guys got to go and it's the next wave? Like, if this team would bottom out, they're not 1 year away from 500, right? If they have the number one pick next year or finish with the rights to the most, the top 3 percentage, they were in the top 3, get it. If they're in that spot, can we agree that it's probably not a winning season next year?
Well, we can say now that, yes, if they end up losing 95 games again, that we will have to recalibrate our expectations of what constitutes success in 2024. But sitting here right now, if you tell me in 2024 they're under 500 still, I would say that there should be some reckoning with that. I think because going next year, Pasquantino is in his 3rd year in the major leagues. Melendez, Bobby Witt at the end of 2024 will be halfway to free agency. Michael Massey, all these will be in their 3rd year. And for hitters, by the 3rd year, really, you are what you should be. I mean, Dayton Moore might say 1,500 plate appearances. The data does not suggest 1,500 plate appearances is necessary for most players. 500 is more than enough. And most of these guys got partial seasons last year, but by the end of 2023, going into 2024, the players should be as good as we can reasonably expect them to become. So if they're not good in 2024, then you have to start asking, are these players ever going to be the guys who lead the Royals to the playoffs? So I think 500 going into 2024 is right now absolutely a reasonable expectation. And I would go so far as to say that they should at least, they should not be eliminated from playoff contention until the final week of the season, which frankly, you don't have to be more than a game or two above 500 and you'll still be alive going into the final week of the season with 12 playoff teams, because 86 to 88 wins is probably enough to get into the playoffs now.
So playoffs by what year?
Playoffs for sure in 2025.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about 3 seasons from now. The majority of teams in baseball will make the playoffs in any given 3-year stretch. I mean, 40% of teams make it in any 1-year stretch. So in a 3-year stretch, typically, now that we have 12 teams, you're probably going to see somewhere between 18 to 21 teams make the playoffs in any given 3-year stretch. And that 3-year stretch starts now. So yes, I think the Royals should be one of the 20 of the 30 best teams over the next 3 years. They are not just going into a rebuilding process. They're not even where the Tigers are. The Tigers are sort of restarting because they've made they've had some draft misses, and they just hired a new general manager. They're not necessarily.
But, I mean, that's exactly the same boat. The fact that they stayed in house should not. I mean, do we really look at it that much differently, or I mean, is
that's a good point, I would say. But when you look at the Tigers, just the failures they've had in the draft over the last couple of years, I feel like and some of the pitchers that have gotten hurt, Casey Mize, Manning, what
failures in the draft? Like how is that?
I'd say the Royals with I'm just having a Bobby Witt. I mean, they had the number 1 pick in draft. Spencer Torkelson might be a good player. He might not. He might not hit enough to justify, playing at first base. Who's the other? Casey Mize was the number 1 pick in the draft, and may never. I mean, at this point, we've had this discussion, this same draft for years. Brady Singer, I think I'd probably take Brady Singer over Casey Mize right now. So I mean, the Royals have made some mistakes for sure, but I feel like the Tigers are behind them. It's one example. Oakland,
Asa Lacy, Frank Mazzucato.
Well, Asa Lacy, yes. Frank Mazzucato, high school pitcher. I wouldn't put him in the bust category certainly right now. He's 19 years old. There are other teams. I'm just saying I could probably pick out 8. I'd like to think I could pick out 8 teams in the majors who are in a worse situation than the Royals are. And frankly, 18 to 21 might be an underestimate. Over a 3-year stretch where all you have to do is be a little bit above 500 to make the playoffs, it might be as many as 22 to 24 teams make the playoffs at least once. So I think 2025, we should have that expectation. I'm tired of making excuses for the organization. It's been a 7-year rebuild process just to get to this point. So we're not starting over. I would say 2024 above 500, 2025 playoffs. I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah, I think 25 for the playoffs, because I think part of the reason you stay the course, and listen, and again, I could be swayed if they come firing out and start moving all kinds of guys. Like if they move Brady Singer, and if like what we get is like, hey, JJ Picola got put in the end, nobody was willing to move for the guys they wanted, and we start watching pieces that you're like, wow, I didn't think that guy was going to go. He's a little young to be going. Then it's clear that they were in a blow it up, but they just thought the timing wasn't right to maximize the returns on things. So that could sway me. But if they're going to stay the course, and Singer's going to anchor the staff, and Pasquantino's going to bat in the middle of the lineup, and MJ Melendez is going to, if those are the players they choose to stay with, then yes, by 25, they have to be in the playoffs. If they're moving those guys as they start to get closer towards arbitration, then it signals to me that they're saying we have to re-go. Now, listen, moving those guys, I could see a scenario where I'd look at it and go, you're just restarting the shot clock. I mean, I don't see a plan here. You're just in the first year, though, I think you've got to give them time to look at what it is, let everybody come in and be a part of the mix and see what it is and actually see what they've got. But yeah, I playoffs by 25, 500. I'm expecting. If you're close to 500 in 24, but you made some trades because like, okay, we're kind of good, but not there. All right, I'll listen to it. But somewhere you got to either check one of these two boxes, 524 or playoffs in 25. You can be a little behind schedule in 24, but then in 25, it becomes a mandatory deal. You got to get there. Let's talk about the money, because that's what a lot of people have been chiming about here in the chat room. And by the way, we're brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete, probably serving the entire KC metro area. You got problems with your parking lot at your office, at your work, with your business? Don't worry about it. Just call GAN Asphalt and Concrete at 816-484-3338. Every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online right now at GANasphalt.com. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. One contractor, all things parking lot. It's GAN Asphalt and Concrete. If you're listening to us via the podcast later in the week, you can be part of the chat room. And the common theme, and I've put a number of them up there in there, is like, spend some money, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about drafting. We're talking about trading. And if you're a regular to the Kaufman Corner podcast, that is a drum that Rany has beaten for quite some time. So it is, you're joining the chorus that Rany Jazayerli is leading like a fine conductor in a symphony. You would agree, like, money is one of the things, and we'll talk about where the system needs to be as well, but money is one of the ways we're going to judge what's going on now. Money's one of the things that we can look at. Payroll, where does it need to go to?
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned that we should talk about expectations for this show, I immediately jumped on, like, expectations aren't just about wins and losses. It's about payroll. It's about commitment from ownership to this organization, especially in light of, obviously, they want a stadium, and I understand the appeal, and I'm not against it. But like, you've got to spend money in order to make money, and if you want the city to invest money in your sports franchise, then you need to invest it yourself. And I think that's particularly relevant when you consider that right now, and I'd be very surprised if the Royals add any significant free agents. Any significant free agents between now and opening day. So the Royals payroll is basically where it's going to be. And according to Cott's baseball contracts, right now, the opening day payroll is looking at around $86 to $87 million. That is, if you take out the pandemic year, that is the lowest opening day payroll the Royals have had since 2013. All right, they were at 94 million last year, 89 million in 2021, 96 million in 2019, and then from 2015 to 2018 they were over 100 million. So they're spending less money than they have in a decade, with revenues continuing to go up across the sport. And again,
Wait, hold on, because I've also, one of the questions we've had in here, and I haven't put it up because I don't know that I have the answer right now, is about how people are going to see the team. Revenues are continuing to go up. We can't say that now this year. With the Bally's deal going under, Major League Baseball stepping in, it's going to be intriguing. They're talking about streaming it and maybe even streaming all the games to everybody, kind of like a, hey, let's whet their appetite, get everybody used to watching all the games, and go, hey, by the way, we did that in an emergency basis, but we're going to charge, and this is what it is, right? So I don't know that the revenue is going up this year.
I agree. I'm saying that over the last 10 years. Yes, this is a unique year, like the pandemic year. And that is why I'm not, what I was about to say is I'm not upset about the fact that the payroll's low. We both said we would like them to have added one more free agent. They could, but I'm not, I haven't called for a riot just yet. Like, this is a unique year, like the pandemic year was a unique year.
Like to believe you're a civilized man.
I do not believe in vigilante justice.
So never come out.
But so yeah, that's why when we talk about the payroll expectations, I'm talking about starting next year. Look, and of course, what the disposition of what happens with Bally's and all these RSNs and bankruptcy and the TV, that will, I reserve the right to change my expectation of payroll based on what happens. If this turns out to be a complete financial disaster for the Royals, I will be somewhat sympathetic. I will also say that it's partly their fault for getting into bed with these companies in the first place. I mean, anybody who's watched a Bally's broadcast over the last couple of years has known that the quality hasn't always been there on the screen. So I guess I'm not surprised that the quality of corporate ownership of the business side of things has also shown some cracks. But assuming they get this worked out, and frankly, in the long run, this may be the best thing for baseball, because if it just eliminates the absurd blackout restrictions. And I know some of the people here, if you have the misfortune of living in Iowa, you are blacked out from like 6 different major league teams from watching.
I got friends in Vegas. It's the same
thing. Vegas is a similar problem.
Padres, Angels, Dodgers, Giants.
I think even the A's.
Diamondbacks, Rockies, A's.
Yeah, it's insane.
All of those are blacked out in Vegas.
So I think, and I'd like to think that the commissioner's office sees this, every crisis is an opportunity, and they see this crisis. Yes, I can't wait for the episode when I show up shirtless urging us to war. When I show up in blue body paint like Mel Gibson and Braveheart, it'll be time to raise the banner. You'll know. But no, I think the commissioner's office is looking at this crisis as an opportunity that they might actually come out of this in a better position to offer streaming baseball, every team, to everyone in America. The NFL found a way to do it. I think MLB can do it as well. So my hope is a year from now, there will be a lot more clarity about that. And regardless, even if they end up taking a small hit in terms of their annual TV revenue, I don't think it's going to go back to where it was in 2013. Where before they signed the Bally's contract, they had the lowest revenue television contract in the sport. And I think that kicked in after 2013. It was probably around 2015, 2016. So yeah, the Royals, I think over the next 3 years, my expectation of payroll really is that there's no reason why it shouldn't go up by 20 million a year over the next 3 years. So we're talking about 110 million next year, 130 in 2024, and frankly, 150 million in 2025, which would be barely the highest payroll in Royals history. After adjusting for inflation, would not be the highest payroll in Royals history. By that point, presumably you have a new stadium. The team would like to have a new stadium being built already, contract signed, the scaffolding is going up, and the expectation is that the team is in the playoffs. I don't think that's at all unreasonable. So that is my expectation for the next 3 years, that we're seeing $20 million payroll raises each year.
By the way, I got to put these together because I thought this was interesting. Tony said they should have watched what Sinclair did to Ring of Honor Wrestling and know they would screw it up, which I was like, interesting. And then I saw this. Hawkins said, should we know what Ring of Honor Wrestling is? I was like, I assume it's like probably a good wrestling league. That was like a mid-tier wrestling league, and Tony's a big fan of it. But yes, the Sinclair, which owns Bally's, they just sold the naming rights to it. But Sinclair is the parent company, has been known as a poorly run company for a while.
Right.
And so when they got that, I'll be honest with you, and I didn't dig into it. I was like, how do they even have the money to be buying this? And how is this getting cleared? Which is a whole nother deal. But yeah, I mean, look, that's going to get better. John Sherman was there at spring training when Todd Lebo and I from works with me at Sports Radio 810. When we talked to him several different times, a couple times, just he and I chatting, Todd and I chatting with him around the batting cages and stuff. And then one time we had him on the mic and everything. And he kept saying, yeah, we like the check. We'd like the check, but we think this is just going to expedite us getting to where we need to go anyway. So I do think that there is a plan. And so I do want to be clear. I don't know that it's more money today, but I think in the long run, getting out from under that TV deal will be a good thing for the Royals because it was a bad one. Mm-hmm. I don't think it ever really had a chance to be successful. And so now they've got to grow the revenue. And I think they are recognizing because all those deals are toppling everywhere. They're recognizing that the Sunday ticket is the path, right? They've got to focus on that and stop holding it out there as a carrot for people, and say, we've got to bring all of our products to everybody. And I think a lot of empty seats, right? Like when you lose your fan base. So I do think revenue will be coming in. So let's assume that revenue will get back on track and get there. Can you put a payroll number that you're thinking by a date? Because I'll give you I'll take a shot.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying. So I'm saying 110 million next year, 130, and then 150. I mean, those sounds big until you look back and say, I mean, in 2017, opening day payroll was 143 million. That was the last year they knew that they were going to try. And the point is, they were trying to win. They had playoffs in mind, and 143 million 6 years ago is, after just inflation, is probably 170, 180 million today. So I don't think that's at all unreasonable.
Did they top out? I thought they topped out at 165 million.
It depends which the one number I'm using, which is the lower number, is just payroll. For competitive balance tax purposes, they throw in things like pension contributions. It's tricky when you talk about payroll because there are different ways to measure it. But I think the simplest way, because it's the one way that the average fan can just look it up on Baseball Reference, is just to add the salaries of the 26 players on the opening day roster and anybody who's on the injured list. Yes, there's a way to do it. If you look at the competitive balance tax, they were at 185 million in 2017, but that includes a lot of other, non-salary expenses.
They got to number 13 in one of the rankings that I'm looking at. What I would say is, as we head into 2023, 11 is about as high as I don't ever expect the Royals to have a top 10 payroll, right? I don't ever expect them. And if they're at 11, it better be because it's like a last hurrah of a wave and they know they're going to be moving, or some payroll's going to be graduating off and it's going to be resetting. So like right now, the 11th highest payroll is the Chicago Cubs. It's at $174 million. 13th, if you want to go to the same spot where they were, the Giants, there's a little log jam there at 173 million. League average is 148 million. Right? Like, these are the numbers that they need to be targeting to get to and get to soon.
Absolutely. I mean, if you just look at it from a ranking, that might be an easier way to do it. They're projected at the 25th highest payroll in the sport. By ranking, aside from the pandemic year, that is the lowest they have rated since 2012. Even 1 year before, they were also 25th. They were from 2015 through 2018, they were between 15 and 20 every year. That was opening day payroll. They actually were higher by the end of the year in some of those years because they added like Johnny Cueto and Ben Zobrist's salary. Mid-season they were trading for guys. But they should, being league average, when you're a contender, if you have actual contending designs, you should be 15th at the bare minimum. I mean, 12 teams make the playoffs. If you can't be in the top 15, then you're sending a message that you're not willing to spend at a playoff caliber level, not necessarily championship caliber, not number one, not Dodgers or Yankees, but top 15, absolutely. So yes, that's basically we're ending up with the same number. We're just getting there in different ways.
Yeah, no, and I agree with where you're coming from and how you get there. So I mean, I do think that's a part of it. Now, what about the minor league system? What are the expectations you have for where this minor league system, and how do you want to go about grading it?
Right. So that's why when I talk about this year being the transition year, when we talk about farm system, I really think we should be talking about the next 12 months. beyond that, like what the Royals farm system looks like in 2025 is far less important than what the actual wins and losses are at the major league level. Because and trying to project a team's farm system ranking in 3 years is almost impossible, just because if you draft really well, the guys that you've drafted may already be in the major leagues and they may not qualify as minor leaguers, right? So I think looking at just a 12-month window, this time next year, when we're talking about farm system rankings, I think it is a perfectly reasonable expectation for the Royals to be in the top half, which doesn't even sound like much, except when you consider some organizations, Baseball America, believe ESPN. I'm not sure about MLB, but I know have the Royals among the 5 or 6 worst farm systems in sport. Now, our friend Keith Law had them at 16th, so he's already got them there. But I'm saying consensus, they should be top half. And I don't think that's unreasonable, because one of the reasons why the Royals are ranked so low by so many people is because they graduated so many guys to the major leagues last year. I don't expect nearly as many guys to lose their rookie eligibility this year. When you think about Witt, Melendez, Pasquantino, but also Michael Massey and Nick Prado, right? Any of those guys, if they spent a full year in the minor leagues last year, would be top 100 prospect worthy potentially. Maybe not Prado or Massey. Certainly the other 3 guys would have been. This year, Nick Lofton, I could see exhausting his rookie eligibility. Obviously, Nate Eaton and Drew Waters, we've already seen. I think they're technically still rookies, but they're not elite prospects, so them not qualifying isn't going to affect things much. But, I would say the vast majority of the Royals' best prospects are all in the low minor leagues. I expect them all to be in the minor leagues this time next year. And then you factor in they have the 8th pick in the draft this coming year. That's there's reason there's a lot of reason to think that they can move up in the rankings, unless if Gavin Cross goes nuts this year and ends up the year in the major leagues, we'll give them a pass. Like the other thing I would say is I would expect them to have 4 top 100 prospects next year. This year they might have 1 in Gavin Cross. I think 4 is a reasonable expectation, unless, again, someone like Gavin Cross or Nick Lofton goes nuts and ends up in the major and doesn't qualify. I would count that guy as one of the 4. But I think having 4 guys in the top 100 next year, which means somebody has to take a step forward. There's a good chance their first-round pick this year will be a top 100 prospect, just like Gavin Cross is now. So that's a freebie. I expect Gavin Cross to maintain that. And then 2 guys need to step up. It could be a pitcher. It could be someone like Mazzucato. It could be one of the young hitters, a guy like Carter Jensen. Could be somebody completely off the radar. But there are plenty of potential guys, and they just need two or three of them to step up.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I like the 4 guys in the top 100. Don't know who they are. I like the kid, Frank Mazzucato to hit the accelerator button and start moving
or
forward.
Or Caderna, that would be the other young pitcher. Very, very possible.
Yeah, one of those guys. Asa Lacy to get fixed and get back on track. I mean, listen, I think a lot of people are already writing him off. The Royals are not. I think that'll be interesting to watch how if they can get him going again. But yeah, I think the 4 top 100 guys is for real, because you said you get a freebie, especially if Cross is there. But that's where we're going to expect. Do you see it happening?
Call me crazy. Yeah, I do. Okay. I actually do. I think we've heard enough good things about Gavin Cross that, assuming he doesn't make it to the majors, I don't think he will, and he doesn't get hurt, I think he'll be on the list. I think that the 8th pick in the draft, that's right on the border. Usually about 7 or 8 guys from the draft will make a top 100 list the following year. But that's a guy will certainly be right on the edge. So we're basically talking about 2 guys need to step up. And I can name 10 different candidates. Luca Tresh has a really good year in AAA and establishes himself as a future catcher. Peyton Wilson. If Nick Lofton, actually, to me, is the guy who I don't think he'll be a top 100 prospect, only because if he actually plays that well, I think he'll be in the major leagues by midseason.
Right.
Michael Garcia would probably be the other guy in that category, where they're just too close to the major leagues. But Carter Jensen's the guy I really would. I really think there's a good chance we could see him move up. And then somewhere in that, all the things they're doing with the pitchers at the major league level, I have to think that there's some pitcher in the minor leagues who's going to be transformed by the organization's new approach and is going to open eyes. And I have no idea who that is, but I feel like there's somebody out there who will do that for us.
All right, let's talk about some of the news that's going on with the team. Let's start with Carlos Hernandez. Have we found a guy who's, going to settle into the bullpen and eventually make his way to the back end of the bullpen and have some value on this team, either for this team for finishing off games, being a part of high leverage situations, or at least maybe becoming that kind of guy and being used as a trade piece? Do you like where this is going with Carlos Hernandez, what you've seen from a little bit in spring training, but also his great work in the World Baseball Classic?
Yeah, Carlos Hernandez could be the canary in the coal mine in reverse for this new organizational approach to pitching. He could be the first sign that we see that things are really different and that they are taking pitchers that they've had in the organization for years who have been a disappointment for the last at least year or two, and transform them. We haven't talked about him almost at all. We've thrown his name out there, but we've been focused on, Lynch and Bubic and even Jackson Kowar and some of these other guys. And Hernandez, I mean, in part because even coming up through the minor leagues, he didn't have the same performance in the minors that some of those guys have. He had really good stuff, but he wasn't a college product. Obviously, he didn't enter the system when he was like 21. He was getting to the major leagues at the time, at the same age some of these guys were drafted. So he was a less finished product. And then last year, he was just flat out terrible. I think his ERA was over 7. His strikeout to walk ratio was awful. There was just, he threw hard, but not nearly hard enough to make up for the fact that he didn't really do anything else. While his fastball was hard, it didn't have the right shape, as we say, right? It was neither a great sinking fastball nor a great rising fastball. It was a fastball right in the middle. And that's exactly where you don't want to be. You don't want to throw pitches right down the middle, and you don't want your fastball to have the characteristics of an average fastball, because that's the kind of fastball that hitters are neurologically trained to hit. They're trained to see a baseball move in a certain way, and you want yours to move in a different way. His did not, and he got smoked. And so going into spring training, just even 4 to 6 weeks ago, he was not on my radar as a guy who would break camp with the Royals. I figured you go back to the minors, maybe they could work some magic, but he was not one of the guys I thought of as a breakout guy. And then we started to see him pitch in the World Baseball Classic. And the thing is, I'm not even talking about his results. I mean, yesterday he pitched against the U.S., struck out Mike Trout. That's impressive. He only faced 4 batters in the game, and he actually gave up hits to 2 of them. So that's not much. He was dominant in his previous outing, but that was against Nicaragua. And, I mean, God bless Nicaragua, but I believe Chesler Cuthbert was their cleanup hitter. And God bless Chesler Cuthbert, but probably shouldn't be batting cleanup for a quality team. So, again, the results don't matter. His sample size is tiny. But even in a tiny sample size, pitch data matters. And the pitch data we're getting is interesting. First off, it's just the velocity part of it. And some of that's maybe just because he's in the bullpen instead of starting, being a starter. But last year, his average fastball was, I think, 96.8. His average fastball velocity in the World Baseball Classic is 99. And you can get away with a lot more stuff when you're throwing 99. You don't have to have an elite shape on your fastball. If you're throwing averaging 99, I think he actually hit 101.5 yesterday, which I knew he had a great fastball. I don't recall him ever hitting 101.
Well, and that's the thing. We've seen velocity before, but it doesn't translate into swing and misses. It doesn't translate into strikeouts. And now that seems to be happening.
Right. Because there's more. The velocity, that by itself is a good thing, right? But and some of that is where he's throwing. He's throwing in the bullpen. But then you look at the shape of the fastball. There's a tweet, Enos Saris, our old pal. This is actually from 3 days ago. This was before his appearance against the Team USA yesterday. He had the best 4-seam fastballs in the World Baseball Classic by Stuff Plus, which is the metric that he uses that incorporates everything about a fastball. It's velocity, it's vertical movement, it's horizontal movement, everything into one number. And Carlos Hernandez is 5th on this list. And Shohei Ohtani is ninth. Ryan Helsley was like one of the best fastballs in the majors, certainly one of the hardest, was number one on the list. I mean, the list, some of these guys I haven't heard of. There's a Japanese pitcher I've never heard of, but that's not the fault of the stat. That's we don't have all these guys in the major leagues. So that caught my eye. But then there's another tweet I've got here from Josh Kaiser, where he looked at not just velocity, but horizontal and vertical movement on Carlos Hernandez's fastball in the World Baseball Classic. And as he put it yesterday, meaning against Nicaragua, he had a fastball that profiled like Garrett Cole and Ryan Stanek. And if you look at the numbers here, his fastball was averaging 99, but his vertical break, which was 12 last year, 12 inches, was 10 inches. And in this case, low is probably better because what that means is it's sinking a little bit less, meaning it's relative to the batter's eyes, it's more of a rising fastball.
Right.
Only 2 inches, but that can be the difference. An average of 2 inches is actually fairly significant when it comes to pitchers. His horizontal break, so in this case, it would be probably arm side run, as they say, kind of sinking opposite from your slider, which was only 8 inches last year, was around 11. And that's a significant change. And yes, when I look at the numbers, Garrett Cole last year average vertical drop was 10.5 inches, horizontal was 10.5. Ryan Stanek was at 11 and 10 respectively. So, and I thought Ryan Stanek was I mean, Garrett Cole, everyone knows, great. That's I can't think of a pitcher I'd rather have him compared to. That's fantastic. Ryan Stanek might be more interesting only because Ryan Stanek was a first-round pick of the Tampa Bay Rays and made it to the majors as a reliever who was actually used as an opener as much as he was a reliever back in 2018, which was the year the Rays really introduced the whole opener idea where you basically have a reliever throw the first inning of the game. And Ryan Stanek that year started 29 games and relieved in 30, which I think was the first time in Major League history a pitcher had ever started and relieved 25 times in the season. He was essentially a reliever, right? 59 games, he threw like 70 innings, but he's been a very good pitcher in the major leagues. He was traded, and now I think he's with the Astros now.
Astros, yeah.
Yeah, he was, I think, briefly with the Marlins, and then now at the Astros. Like, the point is, savvy analytic organizations like Ryan Stanek, and suddenly Carlos Hernandez has a fastball that looks like that. Yeah, sign me up. At this point, this is found money to me. I wasn't expecting anything from Carlos Hernandez, but if this is real, and they're going to put him in the bullpen, I mean, we need to get him back in camp and see what they actually do with him. They may end up sending him to Omaha, which maybe is not the worst thing in the world, just to get his bearings straight and get him used to throwing in relief. But just another reason why I'm quietly a little bit more excited about this team than I expected to be.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you get somebody that has talent, has that big fastball, those are the guys, and they're not performing. Those are the guys you want to go get. Mm-hmm. And then have your coaches unlock it and say, "This, you got to bring the finger over here, bring it like this, start with that, whatever it is." And the Royals are tinkering with guys, and we're hoping that we're going to see Rays-like results. That's the good. Hernandez. Let's talk about the bad. Jackson Kowar has settled into his comfortable apartment. Will soon settle into his comfortable apartment in Omaha. Sent back to work on a slider. This is of note to me. Listen, the fact that I've said all along, the 5 guys that they took in the first 2 rounds overall in the 18 draft, 1 top of the rotation starter, 1 bottom of the rotation starter, and 1 good reliever, and you've beat the odds, right? So if Kowar's going to be the guy that doesn't come through and Jonathan Bolin gets it going again after, coming back from surgery last year, he kind of scuttled, but he was just coming off surgery. If it's Bubic is still a candidate in there, Lynch, of course, Singer's already looking like he's turning the corner. For those positions to get filled out, great. So somebody's going to fall by the wayside, and that's fine if it's Jackson Kowar. The concerning part to me is how much everybody wanted to talk up Jackson Kowar to start spring training. And baseball and the Royals in particular are usually very honest people, right? Baseball is not like football where they lie about everything and act like everybody's great and it's all fantastic. Baseball, they much more so will just say to you flat out, well, this guy's got to work on this guy's struggling. They came out and were all gung-ho on Jackson Kowar. When I got to surprise Jackson Kowar, that's just days into it. I recognize that. But some of them had been there for longer than just the spring training days. And everybody was talking about Jackson Kowar. The fact that that seems to have been either bunk or a flash in the pan is concerning to me. Just because why'd you hype this guy up to now have it go this wrong? Because it's not like he's just off a little. It's not been good.
I'm going to defend them a little bit here. I don't think Kowar has been that bad in spring training. Like if you want to talk about a guy who's just been a disaster, who does both in terms of results and the way he's looked, it's Jonathan Heasley.
Right.
Jonathan Heasley looks terrible, and he might end up being a nobody, and we might have already seen his best. But he was a 12th or a 13th round pick in that draft. Like if Jonathan Heasley, I've heard some people saying, oh, they haven't been able to fix Heasley. Well, he wasn't, he wasn't ever expected to make the majors to begin with, so I'm not as concerned. Kowar, yes, they expect more from him. My impression of Kowar is that he has, he has made some progress in terms of the quality of his fastball. He had kind of the same problem Carlos Hernandez has, which is his fastball just doesn't move. There was just no movement on it. He has a really good changeup, but you've got to have something to pair that changeup with. He didn't have it with his fastball. His fastball has the characteristics of his fastball, and I've got some of the data here of his pitch quality on that pitch is better than it was last year. It's still not there, but what I think is more interesting here is I feel like the Royals are saying we actually think highly enough of Jackson Kowar's potential if he develops that slider that we'd rather him focus on it in the minor leagues than try and succeed in the majors and maybe not throw it as much as he needs to in order to develop it. And Annie Rogers at MLB.com had a good article about the Royals basically sitting down Jackson Kowar and saying, we're sending you to Omaha, but this is not out of sight, out of mind. Like we actually have a plan for you, which was refreshing to see just how explicit they were. This is the thing you have to work on. We need you to throw the slider more. They have worked with him, Zach Bove, the assistant pitching coach, the pitch grip guru, has been working on him with improving the grip to get the better results on his slider because he's never had a good slider. He's never had a good breaking ball, period. He was a fastball changeup guy when they got him in the draft, and that changeup was elite. And I saw him as maybe a Michael Wacha type. You could survive in the major leagues without a great breaking ball, but the fastball has not moved enough, and he essentially is a one-pitch pitcher. And if your one pitch is a changeup, that's not really a pitch. You need a second pitch. But
I know. Ask Doug Jones.
Well, even there, it's I know. Yes. Well, and maybe that might be his future as a one-inning closer type. That's rare. The game has changed a lot since then too. I think Doug Jones will get rocked today. But Kowar, the slider looks better, but they wanted to throw it, practice it, and get used to throwing it in key situations. And it was interesting because immediately after that article, he went out in a spring training game, and I can't find the data right now, but something like 40% of his pitches were sliders. And it was like, great. I don't even care what the results are. So how many times have we seen the Royals talk about, oh, this guy needs to throw a certain pitch, and we're working on whether it's Brady Singer's changeup or Chris Bubich's and they say we need him to throw it, and then he goes out there and doesn't throw it. And it's like, do you have a plan or do you not? So to me, what they did with Kowar, where this is what you need to work on. They said it publicly. He went into a game and executed that plan. I almost don't care about the results. Like, Step one is stick to the plan. Let's worry about the results after that. So I'm not giving up hope on Jackson Kowar. I do think, the odds of him being a starter have gone down. I think he's probably a reliever in the end. But look, at this point, if Jackson Kowar turns into a decent 70 inning a year reliever based on where he was last year, that's a success. This guy has one of the highest ERAs in Major League history for somebody with as many innings as he does. We've talked about that before. So anything from him is a bonus. But I just like the fact that they seem to have a plan. Maybe he hasn't progressed as much as they wanted to in spring training, but I don't think the fact that they're sending to the minors is a sign of, oh, he's, overhyped or that they were wrong about him. I think it's more that they just feel like to get him to where they want him to be, he still needs some time in the minors. And frankly, with as many relief options as they have in camp right now, I think he was a long shot to ever make the team in the first place. So it's almost better they just send him down now, let him know what he needs to work on, and without the pressure of trying to make the team and get results, he can actually just focus on working on this pitch and not worry so much about, making a mistake with it.
A 2-year deal for Jacob Brentz. Just, if you've got a few bucks, why not? The guy had, pretty good stuff, and you wait on him to rehab. Maybe you get something this year, but certainly you look at getting something from him next year. I mean, you okay with this move?
Yeah, it's a weird move. When I first saw it, I'm like, Jacob Brentz he's only been in the major leagues for 2 years. Why on earth does he even need a 2-year deal? But you actually realize he's going to be, because he's going to be on the 60-day injured list. He's probably going to get a full year of service time. He's going to be arbitration eligible next year. And I think this is the Royals basically having to make the decision: do we want to keep this guy around if he's even knowing that we have to give him an arbitration level salary next year, and we don't know what he is. And I think it's 2 years, 1.9 million. So he's essentially getting the league minimum this year, essentially, and then 1.2 next year. So what they're basically did is they went to him and they're like, we'll keep you around, but you've got to commit to this, a fairly low salary next year, which I think makes perfect sense from his standpoint. And then you see teams do this a lot with free agents who've just blown out their elbow and they're going to be out for a year, where they get a 2-year deal and you're basically paying for the second year. I just like the fact that the Royals, again, have a plan here. They're not going to try and rush him back. They're going to give him time to fully rehab, because this is a guy who last year probably shouldn't have been pitching from the beginning, and only appeared in 8 games last year, 5 1/3 innings, 15 runs, 23.63 ERA, and these were not garbage time innings either. He went 0-3. He lost 3 games for the Royals in April before they realized, he's pitching hurt. Again, another one of those just head buried in the sand like an ostrich moments that the old Royals regime would have that would just drive me nuts. I'm hopeful that this is a sign that they realize he has a valuable arm. He had a very good rookie season in 2021, and that there's no need to rush him back. Focus on 2024. He might be back late this year, but there's no reason to push your luck. Have him ready for next year.
Finally, the name Angel Pierre, I'm going to assume it is pronounced.
Yep.
Is now known. He is the player to be named later in the deal for one Adalberto Mondesi. Your reaction to can I guess first? Just to be clear, Randy and I did. All we said was Randy goes, I want to talk about the player to be named later. We now know it. Can I guess your reaction?
Go right ahead.
18 years old last year in the Dominican Summer League.
Mm-hmm.
He hung numbers that were a couple of home runs, 11 doubles, 4 triples, slashed 300, 424, 550. Stands 6 feet tall, weighs 170 pounds. Again, 18 years old last year. He's 19. He'll be 19 all this season. Maybe turned 20 right at the very end. What's his birthday? He's 18 and 19 and 181 is September 19th. So at the end of the year, you're sad. These are the guys that you want them to be getting and not trading. These are the kind of lottery tickets you like to see them getting, and you don't like that they're giving the Red Sox a lottery ticket with Mondesi, who is in and of himself a bit of a lottery ticket. The Red Sox gave away a hurt reliever for 2 lottery tickets, and you'd rather be going the other direction.
Well, the first thing, because when I saw the trade come through, I will confess that I couldn't have told you much about Angel Pierre. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but that was all I knew. But the first thing I saw that was the main thing I cared about was his age. Like you said, he's 19. And that, before I even looked at his stat line, which is quite impressive. I mean, it was the Dominican Summer League. I'm not going to, overhype that too much, but a 974 OPS is nothing to write, nothing to be ashamed of. But it's just the fact that they traded a guy who's so young, he could be anything. I was really hoping that the player to be named later would be, some 23-year-old, live arm, like the ideal would be like a college, some low upside college pitcher, well, or no, who could throw strikes, but just doesn't have the stuff to get guys out in the major leagues. Very low upside, maybe high floor guy who's going to be like a quadruple A player. When the Royals traded for Andrew Benintendi, one of the guys they threw in was a college pitcher named Grant Gambrell, who was a 3rd round pick of the Royals just 2 years before, but was like a college pitcher who maxed out his potential and was probably not going to do much in the majors. That's the guy I would not have missed. That's the guy who maybe he's going to be up and down in the majors, might get into 70 games in his career, but it's just not somebody is going to move the needle. This guy, 95% chance he doesn't make the major leagues, but that 5% chance that he does, he could move the needle. And it's like, why are you the one giving this guy up to get Josh Taylor? We're calling it the Adalberto Mondesi trade. Adalberto Mondesi is not the guy the Royals got. He's the guy they traded. The guy they got is a left-handed reliever who missed all of last season. And it's not entirely clear to me he's going to make the roster coming out of spring training. So, now mind you, Mondesi probably won't make the Red Sox opening day roster because he's probably not 100% yet. But it just seems strange to me that this is the guy that the Royals were willing to throw in. Again, there's a very, very good chance we will never mention his name again on this podcast. There's a small chance, though, that we will, and it's going to be completely unnecessary because the Royals gave him up for Josh freaking Taylor. That's it.
I hope Josh Taylor has a banner year.
I hope he does too, and it wouldn't be the first time I have to eat my words, Soren. So
yeah, it's just amazing to me that you're going to find a way to be upset about them moving Adalberto.
I'm not upset. I'm just saying.
No, I am with you. I do agree with you. 18-year-old guys who get on base at a 400 clip in any league, I'm kind of intrigued by and want to see what they can do. I'm with you. And it wasn't the kind of player I wanted to see. I wanted to see some arm that couldn't throw strikes, that walked as many as he struck out. And the idea was the Red Sox are going to try to harness the fastball. When it's a position player, it immediately scares me. When it's a player that he stole nine of 14 bases, but he has a batter's eye. That to me, third base and shortstop, he plays in the dirt right now. All those things are a little bit concerning to me. I'm with you. What's the upside? The aforementioned Chesler Cuthbert. That's probably what the upside is.
I mean, if he ends up being Chesler Cuthbert, it'll be annoying that we had to throw him in. But again, it's one of those things where in the long run you're not going to remember it. It's not going to matter that much. I just worry that look, 1 in 1,000 of these guys turns into Fernando Tatis Jr. Right? But even a 1 in 1,000 risk, why give up that kind of risk for a left-handed reliever? I'm not even sure. Did the Royals really make the trade to get Josh Taylor or simply to get rid of Adalberto Mondesi? It was almost a trade that they made as much because they needed to move on a guy that was complicating the rest of the roster and complicating Bobby Witt's, playing there playing at shortstop every day. If that's the reason you're making the trade, why do you need to throw in a prospect of any caliber for the privilege of making that deal? That's the thing that annoyed me. If it had just been straight up those two, I've already said my piece. It would have been fine. Move on. Worst case scenario, Adalberto Mondesi has a good year. He's a free agent in a year.
Yeah.
So now on top of that, we have to, in the back of our minds, keep tabs on this player and hope he doesn't turn into, I don't know, Esteury Ruiz, I guess would be the last time the Royals made a trade like that. And, 5 years
later. Do anything at the big leagues.
Exactly. And 5 years later, he's still kind of hanging out, but he's been traded twice in the last year. At some point you have to let that go. I know this is good. It's like a paper cut. It's just going to be there. It's going to be annoying me. I'm going to be checking in on this guy's progress over the next couple of years, and it'll probably never matter, but it's still just going to annoy me.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I hear where you're coming from. Rany, always great talking Royals baseball with you. Good stuff. Next week, we are right before the season. We'll do our predictions on what we think is going to happen. We should. When we go, we know the roster now. We won't quite know the roster yet.
We'll be close. We'll probably be able to predict who's going to be the last couple, roster spots in the bullpen, et cetera. Yeah,
exactly. So we have that coming your way next week. So for the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro, reminding you, we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They've been making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. If you've got one of those parking lots that who was telling me, was it Buccaneer Bruce was saying he deals with a lot of the parking lots that need the help. then call Gann Asphalt and Concrete 816-484-3338. If you're looking to join a great team, a great company, they're hiring at all positions. Look them up online at GannAsphalt.com. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, pay time off, and insurance, just to name some of the benefits. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com. So for Dr. Rany Jazayerli, my name is Soren Petro. We'll see you next week at Kaufman Corner.